Hi, have you ever wondered why some people can do things you would never do? Maybe bad things, maybe difficult things, and perhaps they leave a wake of pain and misery behind them, but they continue doing it. Something you couldn't stand to do. Have you ever wondered why sometimes people seem to persist in their own misery, even though there are ways out? Have you ever wondered why someone's quirks actually work out for them, or why your quirks actually work out for you in one place but don't work out for you in another? Well, I want to talk about that today. My name is Dr. Jim Porter, and I'm a mental health counselor in Gainesville, Florida. If you want to come see me and you live near this area or can get down here regularly, please type my name into your online search engine and you will find my phone number. The topic tonight or today is secondary gain. It's also the question of what is a mental illness. For example, I think I've heard a lot of people say, oh, I'm so OCD at this or I'm so OCD at that. Now, I've heard many people argue that it is not OCD when somebody's a neat freak or they're extremely organized. I'm not going to argue that today. I understand that argument, but that's not what I'm going to argue today. What I'm going to argue is that sometimes, even if you have very, very bad habits, they may fit in somewhere. That is the question of whether something is a mental illness. Is a mental illness at work a mental illness at home? Is a mental illness at home and in your regular life a mental illness when you're at home? When you're at work. And I would say maybe not. We have a big book that claims to tell you what all the mental illnesses are. But there's an even larger book called the International Catalog of Disorders, something like that, the IDC. Right now, and it's in its 10th life or its 11th life or its 12th life, so you'll hear it called the ICD-11 or the ICD-12. It has an even broader list of mental illnesses. So mental illnesses are how we try to categorize these questions of weird behavior, feelings, emotions, lifestyles, things that are out of the norm or apparently harmful, right? Let me go for ways. Just put that book down. What is going on there is that we're trying to make sense out of emotional, biological, and spiritual events that are very difficult to make sense of, so we categorize them. Well, categorizing them into distinct mental disorders can help create clarity, but it can also help create confusion. Let's talk about obsessive compulsive disorder. Well, if someone is obsessive compulsive about safety, for example, they're always worried there's a danger and they're always trying to make that new safety fix. Somebody may hire them because they may be very beneficial to that company, helping them with their security. Now, that person may be suffering because someone is paying them for their mental illness, and that might make it more difficult to be motivated to recover from it. In fact, they may be going to a therapist or taking medicines to help them with this obsessive compulsive behavior, emotion, thoughts, and true diagnosis, but they are going to have trouble putting full effort into getting it taken care of if their livelihood depends on obsessive compulsive thoughts and behaviors. That is that's the concept of secondary gains, but that's a really blatant example. Another example is depression. Now, this can be very taboo to talk about, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. When people think of certain disorders, particularly bipolar and psychosis, they say, neurological, there's nothing you can do. You need to go in and do something to the brain. Right now, we can't just dig in and start probing their brain. We can do brainwave stuff and we can do medicines, and that'll take care of it. Well, it turns out those things don't take care of it any better than traditional therapies necessarily. And one of the factors that may contribute to someone's, say, depression going on is if they're getting what is called a secondary gain. Now, this is more true to what secondary gain is. It's a behavioral principle. Behaviorism states that if we get punished for something, that thing will decrease, that behavior, that activity will decrease. And if we get rewarded for something, that behavior will increase. Also, this can be very unconscious, not something you choose to do. Like classical conditioning is not based on punishment and reward necessarily. It's based on pure association. So classical conditioning is different than operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is based on punishment and reinforcement. But classical conditioning is just based on pairing a natural response to trigger. Okay, so you've got a natural response to a natural trigger. You pair that trigger to an unnatural trigger, and that unnatural trigger will now trigger your natural response. So let's say you've got depression somehow, some way. You didn't choose to have it. However, when you are looking depressed, people come around and do wonderful things to you, and perhaps it feels good. Perhaps a part of your system really likes it when people do that. It's not impossible that your unconscious nervous system will continue to create that depression because it gets a gain from it. You may not be aware of the process. This is not you choosing your depression. This is a neurological process. So that is secondary gain. So somebody can suffer for a long time really wanting to get better, but some kind of payoff can be making it harder for them to make the progress they want to make. This gain and this reluctance to make progress can be either conscious or unconscious or a mix of both. Now, how come people can, I want to get into what the definition of a mental illness is. A mental illness is not something clearly definable. Right now, what we have here is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, otherwise DSM-5 trademark. And what that is that we therapists and psychiatrists and we patients and everything, we like to get on the phone and talk about what's going on with us. And if we find that this, and this problem are clustering together, this and this, what we call symptoms or criteria for diagnosis, cluster together, we want to put them under an umbrella and give them a name. And that's basically what a disorder is. Now we're trying to find better ways to validate them through MRI imaging, functional MRI imaging, and super wonderful meta MRI imaging so that we can correlate it with something physical. We're working on that, and there's progress in that, but nevertheless, mental disorders are a human construction. We invented the concept of mental disorders because it's easier to find a name for something. And so that way we can talk about it easier. We can tell it to the client and then go, at least somebody understands what I'm going through. Because when we give something a name, it means that a lot of people have gone through it. And so it can be very helpful in many ways. But that doesn't mean that there's really such a thing as social anxiety disorder or bipolar disorder. It means it's our best way of naming and explaining some things we're seeing in people that seem pretty clearly to exist there in one way or another. So it's kind of like a map. In the real world, you can take a map, pull it away from your eyes, and then look at the actual territory. In mental disorders, you can look at the name and all the criteria and all the diagnostic explanations of mental disorder and get that. But when you pull it away, you can't just look and see a physical mental disorder somewhere. You can only observe the behavior, look for patterns, and try to decide what's going on. So what that means is that we might pathologize things because we've seen them go wrong before. So let's talk about someone who likes to hold a lot of thoughts in their heads. They don't do it by choice. It just comes naturally. They like to skip from thing to thing. They synthesize ideas in ways nobody knows how they did it. Sometimes those syntheses don't make any sense, so they're making all kinds of logical leaps. But sometimes their logical leaps actually turn out to be true, and it's amazing. And perhaps they prefer to have a lot of data coming in or at least they're comfortable, they're used to it. It's no different than what's going on in their mind. So they seem to be able to flip from thing to thing and do a lot of things. And you could call that being ADHD. You know, I'm sure that if you looked at someone and you went through the diagnostic criteria and you found enough, then you'd say, well, I can label this person with ADHD. And ADHD is bad. It's a bad thing. It is a disability. It's keeping you from being able to function in class, and you're never gonna have a career. But let's say you have the same activity and it's working out for you. They'll call you a CEO or a business owner dealing with a lot of things at the same time. So people with ADHD are overrepresented in the population of CEOs. What that means is there is a certain percentage of people in the normal population that have ADHD. When you pull only CEOs out of that, there's a larger population, a percentage of CEOs with ADHD than there should be in if you're comparing them to the broader population of people. So what's going on here is that what we call a disorder may not be a disorder. And also what's become a problem behavior may have shaped itself because it paid off somewhere. In addition to that, we may need to start calling something a disorder when it's affecting one part of their life, but just a set of skills when it's affecting another part of their life. For example, we can have someone who is the elite, the best of the best in their field, acting, psychotherapy, writing, running a business, the richest person on the planet, is elite at accumulating wealth, ballet dancing, singing, mathematics, and they have become elite at it, and they are so good at it. More than likely, you're going to find out that they had an unavoidable drive to become good at that. It's not just raw talent based on genetics. They had to work at it, or else you don't become the best at it. And when you work at something, you have to dedicate a lot of energy, time, headspace, maybe even money to that. And what happens then is the more time you dedicate to one aspect of your life, the more you have to decide how much you are going to ignore, neglect, or take away from other aspects of your life. So this person's behaviors are very helpful in their field. They become very good at it because they spend day and night thinking about it. They focus on it. They concentrate on it. They dedicate a large proportion of their brain and body to it. So they excel. And that is wonderful to everybody who appreciates them for that thing. But you will find that as you appreciate somebody for what they excel in, and that becomes important to you, if you get to know them on another level of relationship, or if you get to know the people that they relate to, you may find that they are doing extremely poorly in that. Now, this may not always be the case. Maybe some of us have learned to excel in every part of our lives. That's possible. More than likely, we can excel at several parts of our lives. But there's always a ball that we're juggling that we need to go pick up, probably. There's always an iron that's been left too long on the fire, so to speak, or on the ironing board or whatever. There's always something that's been neglected. So oftentimes you will find that the career obsessed may be ignoring the people in their lives. The career obsessed may be ignoring their own personal needs for time off, good health, plain enjoyment, a little bit of boredom, a little bit of mindfulness, a little bit of appreciating nature. you will find these turning up in other forms of illness, like physical health illness and social problems. For example, the family is planning to leave this person. There's a divorce planned. The kids are suffering neglect, and just plain emotional neglect, and are moving toward bad behaviors, terrible self-esteem, those kind of things. So I think what's going on really is that, yes, maybe some people are just unlucky and they have something that's called a mental illness and it's a very physical cause and they may be stuck with it. I kind of doubt that that's 100% true with anyone. Excuse me. What I think mostly is going on is that it can be very difficult to fix a pattern of emotions, of thoughts and beliefs and expectations, and or a pattern of behaviors. And a lot of times all those three go together. And it's very hard to do because we could be punished for our efforts to get better because we might have a reward removed from us that we really, really responded to. Or we might fear that we're going to lose that reward. In addition, we might get punished because people may not like it when we start to change. They might not like it, or they might unintentionally, they might not like it and unintentionally or intentionally show some disregard for the new you. Many times when I was doing substance abuse therapy, my clients who were succeeding in staying clean and sober were telling me that their family couldn't stand them anymore. The family had adapted to that person that previously they had so much wanted to see change. They wanted to see that person stop drinking, stop doing their meth, stop doing their drug. And when the person did stop doing their drugs, the family found it unbearable because they needed to change too. So, if you have any changes that you want to make in your life, don't even worry about whether it's a mental disorder or not. If it's difficult, get support. Get friends who will support you. Get books that will support you. Be careful with YouTube videos. Get a therapist who you believe can help you. Get support and don't give up, because I also believe that, let's say you're diagnosably obsessive compulsive. And what I mean by that is you can't stand thinking about anything but danger and how to prevent danger. Because maybe, let's say, you've been a police officer all your life, and not only did you start off a little bit interested in preventing danger and being on the lookout and having the right response or whatever, but then you've been trained and rewarded for that in your job. You've been dictated to watch here, watch there, and watch everywhere. Perhaps. Depends on what your police training was like. Because you've also probably been taught how to calm down when there's nothing going on. But you work in the city, so everything in the city is going to wind up being a trigger for you. You knock on doors at homes, so maybe everything, even at your home, becomes a trigger for you about danger. I think it's very possible that you can learn how to be a cop when you're in uniform and not a cop when you're at home. I want to repeat that. I believe that you can learn how to not be a cop at home and still be a cop, the same level of reactions and abilities when you're in uniform and when you're on the job. Now, if you're a non-uniformed person and you actually work directly with the criminal perpetrator population and apprehension and all that stuff, I'm not sure about that, because you're going to want to have a cue-dependent set of reactions. You want to have cues at home that say, I am home, I am not on the job, I am not a cop right now. And you also want to have cues at work that tell you, I am on the job, so that you can be in a convenience store as a cop, and you know you have some cues, your uniform, something else that tells you, I am a cop right now. And then when you're in your off time and you're at a convenience store, you have cues saying, I am not a cop right now. Okay. Now what that's based on is, for example, psychotherapy researchers were able to train mice to find out that there is a lever that gives them food. So they go into a cage, they see two levers. They randomly push each one of them because they're just skittering around and accidentally touch one. Eventually they learn which one gives them treats. Let's say the treat is a little dollop of cocaine powder. They really are going to like that cocaine powder. So they're going to uncontrollably start responding to that lever. And let's say you decide to make that cocaine come out through that lever pull only if there's a little red light that's on in the cage. So that mouse, he wakes up from his cocaine stupor and he sees the lever and there's no light on, but you've installed the light. And he goes over there and pulls the lever, and that doesn't work. So then he goes over and pulls the other lever, and that doesn't work. And he keeps going around doing random stuff, and he's worried, and this is a really cool experiment, but experiments similar to this have been done. You turn on the light, and the mouse notices something different, and he's distracting, but then he goes back to brainstorming. He's trying things. He's trying to get out of the cage. He's scratching on the floor. He hits that lever again accidentally. Cocaine drops out. And then he learns over time that when that light, now he's not going, oh, the light's on. His body is reacting automatically. He's actually wanting to quit cocaine. He's looking to call some friends to get him to help quitting cocaine. But it's not working because his body responds. When that light is on, and only when it is on, he is triggered to go and push that lever. And when it is not on, he is not triggered to push that lever. And so he might be triggered to try to turn that light on if he can go up to it and try to fiddle with it. You never know. And that's what I mean by cue dependent triggering. You want to have something that tells you, I am now in cop mode and I am now in not cop mode. And being a mental health counselor, I want to say this to psychotherapists. I think you all need the same thing. When you're at work, you're a psychotherapist. When you're anywhere else, you're not a psychotherapist. And you need to develop cues, because the kind of interactions that we psychotherapists do, they work when we're doing psychotherapy. And some of them do work in regular life. Empathy is great everywhere. Good listening is great everywhere. Trying to really meet a person where they're at is great everywhere. But too much of that, too often, becomes self-neglect. And it also can irritate people because they don't want you counseling them and helping them. They want to go find their own counselor and helper. They don't want you to volunteer to be that for them. So today I have talked about cue-dependent response to stimuli. I've talked about secondary gains, and I've questioned the definition of mental disorder. Thank you very much.